So let's dish.
Man. So I don't also know, I wanted to also mention to anybody that's listening that there's so many layers to this conversation, right? We've got boundaries, we've got coercive control, we've got narcissism, we've got the system of patriarchy at play, we've got misogyny, right? We've got, at the same time, we've got a separate situation that's going on, not just with Jonah Hill and Sarah Brady. And really, it's not even Jonah Hill and Sarah Brady. It's really like Sarah Brady right now because Jonah Hill's not even saying anything.
Correct.
There's also Keke Palmer and Darius Jackson. That's also happening as well. And we see the thread that I'm seeing, right, is this expectation that is put on a woman to behave and operate in a certain way because of their standards, right? The standards of whatever male they're involved with, the standards of patriarchal society, which all women are operating under, at least here, you know? So there's just so many layers to this conversation. And I figure we could just pick one of them and just go.
Yeah, well, look, you and I were speaking off camera just to get the vibe and figure out what we wanted to talk about. And, you know, one of the things that I thought was so interesting, and it's going to come in with Keke Palmer, it's going to come in with Sarah, is what are boundaries really? And what's the difference between boundary and control? Like, you know, the reality is when I'm working with people, we're constantly working on learning how to set boundaries because a lot of people are so uncomfortable doing so, but the boundary is never to punish the other person or to dictate to the other person. The boundary is always being set by the boundary setter for themselves.
Yeah.
And so when someone's being told, if I had to set a boundary for someone, I can see the other person's actions or behaviors are dysregulating to me. So I'm setting a boundary to disengage. I'm not going to that person and saying, you need to act A, B, C, X, Y, Z. And if you don't, I'm going to withdraw affection. That's a control. What I do is silently to myself, I say, I'm worth better treatment and I receive what I accept. And what this is for me is unacceptable. And so therefore, I'm going to pull back until I can assess to see if that person is even capable of being that way authentically. I'm not going to that person and telling them they have to shift and change in order to meet my needs.
Yeah. You know, you said something, the withdraw. And immediately when I hear that, I think of the shame response system, right? So I'm curious about the conversation of shame in this because it's what came up, right? Like it's this person, I'm feeling abandoned because you're behaving this way. And so it's triggering this feeling, right, of abandonment and being not valuable, right? And shame in me. And so I can react in the way in which these text messages are showing us, which is I'm going to attack you, right? I'm going to attack another. I'm going to attack you. Or I can attack myself. And if we're dealing with somebody who is in therapy or is working with a coach, particularly a trauma recovery coach, or somebody that's talking about shame and building up confidence and having self-agency, it's likely not going to be to the attack self because you're learning, right? I'm a good person. But the withdrawal could come in. And that is a good time to sort of reassess, take a moment and step back and go, okay, well, what is it that I necessarily need? And how do I need to operate from this point on? But I think the majority of the time when emotions are heightened and we have these shame responses, our immediate, in relationship, our immediate responses to attack the other person and try to control the other person.
Well, and what's interesting is to give people the backstory. There's this set of, texts being swished around the social verse from this gal, Sarah Brady, who used to date Jonah Hill, where she's sharing text threads between the two of them that she felt was very controlling. And at one point, and she's calling him misogynistic, she's calling him narcissistic. We can't say if that's accurate or not. He hasn't come to the forefront of that. But with some of the things that we're seeing is he's almost condescending in the fact that he's saying, pure and simple. Basically, here's my rules of engagement. And if you can't meet them, so be it. But it's really pretty simple. So like, if you can't meet them, then obviously you can't do simple things either. Yeah. Like, I'm not asking you to do a lot here. So now there's this like that's what we talk about, coercive control. Yeah. It's very manipulative in a very covert way because you're kind of being condescended. Like, listen, I'm not asking you to do a lot here, Sarah. It's pretty simple. And I'm pretty sure you can do it, right? Mm-hmm. But if you can't, that's all good. And that language is really designed so he can become the victim. I didn't ask her to do anything. I always told her it was okay if she backed out. But what people don't understand is that there's nothing normal about a partner putting a set of limitations on their other partner that restrict them socially or professionally, which is what he was doing. And he knew what her profession was because it's what attracted him to her from the get.
Yeah, in the first place. And he did. And it's very clear that he was like, this is what I need. And if you can't be that, I'm not the partner for you. And if you're not someone who was versed in, sort of that coercive control language, it looks as though he's just stating what he needs. And that's fair. And it is. It absolutely is. It's the manner in which those text messages now, again, we don't know the whole story. We're just commenting to what we saw, what has been shown. And the fact that this happens to everyday people all the time that are in relationships, which makes this a topic of discussion for a lot of people right now, and probably why every news outlet picked up on it. Because where is the line about stating your boundaries and your needs versus coercive control and trying to get your needs met through subtle manipulation, right? Mm-hmm. And it was very condescending, like plain and simple. This is it. Like, hello, why don't you just get that? And it's interesting because I was reading, everybody's talking about Darius Jackson, talking about how Kiki Palmer said, it's the dress though, you're a mom, right? Like there's already so much to that. But he further, after he got attacked online, he further went and talked more and said, basically, he's like, this is my family. These are the standards I have set for my family, point blank, period. And so where is it between, these are the standards. I have autonomy to draw in my own life what I hope for and wish for me. And that's just sort of the way it is.
But the question is, does Kiki have voice and choice?
Right.
Does Kiki have voice and choice to say, I hear you and I love you and I value your values. However, as a human, I also get to set my own standards. And if I feel sexy, I want to go out in this dress, I have the voice and the choice to be able to do that. And as you know, the moment we lose our voice and choice, right, and we have that self-doubt and we have that lack of connection to what our own personal needs are, because I don't see Jonah in that situation asking her, what are your desires and needs? Do you want to have these relationships with people? Do you want to still be surfing? Do you want to surf in a bikini? Like, she has a voice and choice in those things too. And the moment the person starts to lose it because it makes the other person feel comfortable and they're only willing to do it out of fear of losing the connection, now you don't belong. You're just shape-shifting to fit into the mold.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And he did say that. He said he didn't ask, right? Do you want this? And maybe he did, and that's not what we've seen. But we did see part of it where he said, if you want a family and if you want these things, this is what needs to happen, right? And so he was very much saying, do this or else, right?
It's my way or the highway.
It's my way or the highway. And that is a clear indicator of there's not sort of a joint respect of agency for each individual in that process. And he kept saying, like, hey, if that's not it, good for you. I wish you well. And then it would be followed up with something else that was condescending and controlling and saying, this is my need. And so it just, of course, all around was quite toxic. And so I had asked you earlier, why do you think that instead of him saying this, right? He's the one that's in the up power position. He's the white male, right? He's all the things of positional power. Why do you think he didn't say, you know what? I'm having these feelings. He's in therapy. I would hope that his therapist is talking about shame responses, right? I'm feeling this sort of way and it's not good for my mental health. So I'm going to go ahead and step away from this relationship instead of telling her, do this or I'm going to leave you.
Well, that is the question, right? Because if it truly is rooted in his own dysregulation and it truly is rooted in his own insecurity, and his need would be, how can we come to this together? He wouldn't need to dictate. And what was striking me as uncomfortable is his use of therapy speak in a very inappropriate way. And I think what's so important to me and what I was sharing with you off camera was that, again, Jonah's not here to defend himself. He hasn't tried to defend himself. He isn't coming out and talking about it. However, there is someone that's watching this play out that's going, oh my God, this is what's going on in my own life. Like, this is not an isolated incident. And that's why I wanted to bring it up, because if someone's watching this play out and is saying, is that wrong that my partner's asking me to do these things? If it's causing them to question it, if it's causing that light bulb moment, that's who this really is for, because it's really not okay for somebody to dictate. But if you've been raised systemically in a culture or an environment where you don't have a lot of voice and choice, and you've been raised to be seen and not heard and not have opinions, it's not going to feel foreign to you to be told what to do.
No, you're actually going to prefer it.
Correct, because it's going to be familiar.
That's going to be the comfortable way to go. Right. It's actually scary to sort of be up on your own and have your own agency and have your own voice.
So somebody might be watching this and going, well, what's wrong with what he's doing? And I think the thing to talk about is, in a symbiotic, healthy relationship, no one should be dictating to any other party the expectations. Now, that's not a relationship. That's a power struggle.
Yeah. There's definitely not equanimity in those actions. I can just relate to my own life. When my husband and I have a disagreement, we can say, we agree to disagree and whatnot. But if in that disagreement, he doesn't say, I don't do what his request is, right? There's no threat of him leaving me.
That's kind of the point.
Yeah, it's like, so if you are in a situation, I want people listening to understand that you can disagree, right? And still have your relationship. There is something to be said if you disagree and there's a fear of loss. Right? This person.
The fear is, I'm going to withdraw affection from you as a form of punishment. Yeah. If I'm telling you what I need, and if you can't do it, that's fine. But then I'm going to have to punish you by withdrawing my affection.
Yeah.
That's what falls underneath that umbrella of narcissistic abuse.
It's emotional abuse, right? So people think, he's not abusing me, but that's emotion. What we're talking about, that's emotional abuse.
It's actually psychological.
And psychological abuse. Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. So if some people are listening and going, well, is that okay? Or should I be thinking about that? My answer would be, yeah, I would think about that. I would look at, how safe do you feel in voicing your opinion on something? I remember in my relationship where I was under severe coercive control, my home wasn't even decorated because I couldn't choose what paint to put on the wall without him having something to say. And I wanted to make sure that I could. So my home was left undecorated for years because you avoid the argument and you just don't sort of live. You just sort of do whatever the other person says. And it's really, really is quite toxic.
But you know what would be an interesting, example of that is if he was attracted to you for your interior design skills.
Yes, good point.
And then made you doubt your interior design skills because somehow he knew better than you. So I use that as an example because
so true.
By all accounts, everything I've been able to read is he slid into her DMs based on some of her modeling in bikinis as a surfer, which, by the way, we should be really clear. She's like a semi-pro surfer who's like trying to become a lawyer, actually. She's not like a pro surfer. And now part of this list of requirements, if you will, is no more modeling, no more, wearing a bikini when you're surfing. I don't want you hanging out with men that are surfing. I want to kind of be selective about the females that you're hanging out with when you're surfing. But yet that's part of her profession. And it's what drew them together. It's what he commented on and what he said he found attractive in her, which if people are not familiar, in this kind of, and I'm going to use this term lightly, abuse, there's this idea of a love bomb of I now can see what's really at play for you. I can see what really lights you up. So I'm going to act like it really lights me up too. And that's how I'm going to get into the mix.
Yeah.
And then the moment that I've got the hook, now I'm going to start to make you feel really, really bad about what it is that you do and who it is that you are. And now the abuse is that I'm causing self-doubt. I'm causing you to question yourself. I think authentically this is what I want to do, but you're telling me it's a bad thing to do, and I like you and I appreciate you and I want that relationship. So now I have fear of showing up in my authentic self because you're telling me that you're going to withdraw attention and love and affection if I don't meet the need.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because part of the conversation is her taking down some images, right? And as a model and as somebody in that community, they get paid for posting and endorse. That's one of the ways in which she makes income. So we're talking about, a form of financial control as well. And when we talk about the layers and the nuances of this, it's not black and white, right? And people just want to say it's either this or it's that. And there's so much to this, just even in the time that we've been talking, we've been able to point out so many different categories and areas in which it's very clear that this was an power sort of over situation. And, I'll put it out there. I'm very happy they broke up and that they didn't stay together.
Well, the interesting thing is I was, before we were going to go online, I was like, well, let me spend some time over lunch, like kind of reading and seeing what else is out there. And one of the questions that was being asked was, why now? Why is she coming forward now?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons she's saying she's coming forward now is because she knew he quickly moved into another relationship when he could see she was not going to abide. And people need to understand that's part of this playbook. I'm going to withdraw and then I'm just going to go find it somewhere else because there's this inability to relationally really attach. Like, I feel as though in those kinds of relationships, there's really no relationship. Everything's super transactional, but the person that's in it doesn't really know it's transactional.
Mm-hmm.
So he quickly moves on to another relationship. She gets pregnant. And she's been pregnant and she just had the baby not too long ago. And what she's saying publicly is I waited because I didn't want to release this when the gal was pregnant because I wanted her to have a safe pregnancy and I wanted the child to have a safe pregnancy. But now that the baby is no longer in gestation and the baby's here and that piece of the connection is no longer, she has a right to know. And if she's also in it, she has a right to know she's not the only one.
Yeah. So why do you that she just didn't say it directly to her and instead of doing it? Because from what I read,
it's a really good question.
What I read is that this has been actually going on for a year. She's already released some of this stuff and it's been circulating for a year. So it's not new news. It's just that all the media outlets have picked it up on Friday when she decided to repost it on her Instagram. And what I read was that, you know, when he started first dating his new woman, they had mistaken it for her.
I saw that.
And she was upset by that. And then one of the threads that I read that she had posted was, I'm just really sick and tired of people bringing his name up to me. So let me really, really show you the
possibly
business.
Because if it really was a coercive control kind of situation, it has to be very triggering for her to pretend as though it was a relationship that people assumed was healthy when it caused her so much pain.
Yeah. And I think that's important to name, because when we go through our trauma, if we never have felt like we've been heard, to everyone else, it's going to seem like, oh, why do you keep talking about this? Why do you, it's a year later. It's all of these things. But they're going to attach motive to it. And we don't know what her motive is. No. But as a woman, and I'm sure as you as a woman and people that have been through our own trauma, it's important that we're heard. Mm-hmm. It's important that we get validation, and maybe she didn't get that before and she's getting it now. And whether she's right or wrong, that need to go, what happened to me happened, and to be believed that what happened to me happened is part of the healing process. And
really is. And you're making me think about, I begged for therapy at 15 years old. Begged. That was in 1986. I'm 51 years old. Okay. And no child should ever have to beg for that. But I did, because no parent was wanting their kid to go into therapy in the 80s. There was so much stigma set around that. And I had this very dysfunctional thing happening at home, and I recorded it on like a double tape, like boombox. And I did it so I could bring it to my therapist. And I wanted her to hear, because I was trying to explain what I was experiencing, but I wanted her to hear it because I wanted the validation, because at home it was being denied. When I was trying to bring it up, it was being denied. And I gave it to her. And she goes, what is that? And I told her what it was. And she said, respectfully, I'm not going to listen to it because I don't need to listen to it because I believe you.
Oh, how did that make you feel?
Very good. Yeah. Very good. She was like, you're seeking validation at like a third and fourth and fifth level, but you don't need that from me. I believe you.
Yeah.
I got it.
Yeah.
I got it.
So the question that I'm asking of why now, why a year later, I think my question would be, when she shared it a year ago, did she get validation? Did she feel seen and heard? And it doesn't sound to me like she did.
It was funny because I don't know if it was on Threads or Facebook or somewhere, you know, I was making a post about it and somebody said, oh, it's interesting to me that she's still talking about it now. Looks like she has some healing to do. And my response was, or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe she's on the healing journey and she finally has found her voice and feels she has the choice to use it. And this is part of the process, not the fact that she needs to do it, but the fact that she has been doing it and she finally feels safe enough to be able to do this. It takes courage.
And she has every right to. I think she posted that I thought was really spot on. She had said something like, 50% of the story is his and 50 is mine. And she's sharing her 50. And, whether she chooses to do that publicly or privately or whatever her motives are, that's not of any concern of mine. It's the fact that a woman has her half of her story and she's sharing it. And that's it. Like, to make a judgment on that instead of just be with and validate and witness someone's story. That's when we talk about, you and I both came from the International Association of Trauma Recovery Coaches. And so much of our time is spent just literally holding space for somebody.
Yep.
Just that.
Yep.
And I just really, the question for me is like, how much space was held for her? It seems like a lot of space is being held for her now. right? And maybe that will be the end of it, right? Maybe that will be the end of it. And maybe then people will be holding space for Jonah Hill if and when he chooses to respond. I mean, as you said, he's got his new baby and he's, maybe just sort of in his world with his new relationship. And that's fine too. I just think that it was important for us to come on and discuss because this is happening to people. It really is. It's happening to people, and it's particularly happening to young women. She was 25 at the time that this happened, and he was 15 years her senior. And, you begin to question your worth, your identity, and you start to wonder, and you'll make the adjustments, and then it doesn't feel like that's good enough. And I just want any woman that's out there to understand and know that they are good enough, period.
But that is the trauma. That's what people don't understand. The moment people start to question their self-worth, the moment they have self-doubt, the moment they don't feel that anything is ever enough, that's the aftermath of an event. That's the trauma, not the event itself. Yeah. Because now you're living your life through a filter and through a lens of hustle and spinning wheels to try to make somebody else happy when it's impossible.
Yeah. Especially if you yourself don't even know what that's like because you don't even know your own voice.
Right.
So, yeah. Well, is there anything else you want to say before we jump off? I mean, we covered a lot of that.
It's important. I mean, look, I think it's important that it's really clear that it is one-sided, right? That somebody else, the person who it is being talked about, has not come forward. So we can't say, oh, Sarah's all in the right and he's not in the whatever. I wanted that to be really clear. I wanted to use it as an illustration of it's happening a lot of places for a lot of people. And if it hits for that person, and it's triggering and it feels scary because you're like, oh my God, that's happening in my relationship. And I've been feeling for a while that might be off. And now I'm seeing this is getting a lot of play. It's worth finding somebody that you can trust to have that conversation with, because it's worth exploring whether or not it really is safe and healthy.
Yeah. And to understand that a boundary is not setting an expectation of behavior on somebody else so that you can feel safe. A boundary is, this is what I'm noticing in me. And so I'm going to handle me in a particular way. Right. And there's a big difference between the two.
100%. So awesome. This has been so good.
Well, I'm so thankful that, we got the time to just hang out together, and hopefully anybody who's listening, that was really helpful to you. Reach out to Stacey or myself. We're both trauma recovery coaches, and this is our day in and day out. And we'd love to hold space for you if you need it. All right.
Awesome.
Have a wonderful day.
Bye.